When 13-year-old Ryan White got AIDS from a blood donor in 1984, he was only given 6 months to live. Even though doctors said he posed absolutely zero risk to students, he was banned from returning to school by a petition signed by 117 parents. An auction was even held to raise funds to keep him out, and a local newspaper that supported him received death threats. The family was forced to leave town when a bullet was shot through the window of their home. Ryan outlived the doctor's diagnosis by 5 years, dying at the age of 19. Only 14 people in recorded medical history have ever survived rabies, and all of them suffered permanent brain damage. In 2006, a team of scientists in Iceland were freezing clams in order to study the effects of climate change. But they ended up accidentally killing the oldest known animal in the world, a 507-year-old ocean quahog clam named Ming. Through her grandmother Mary, Queen Elizabeth was a direct descendant of Vlad the Impaler. This technically makes King Charles the heir to Dracula's bloodline. This is a photo of Salvador Dali taking his pet anteater for a walk in Paris in 1969. Mark Dumas has a pet polar bear that purrs when he's around. They wrestle each other, swim together, and even sleep together. There's a famous pet penguin named Lala that lives in Japan. Every day he walks into town with a backpack and collects fish from the local market. In the 1950s, a Texas businessman bought a lion named Blondie as a family pet. She often gave rides to the kids and died of old age as a beloved member of the family. The day after the Titanic sank, various newspapers reported that the ship hit an iceberg but no lives were lost. It wasn't long before they realized what horrible mistakes they had made, since more than half of the ship's 2,200 passengers perished. NASA originally planned on sending Big Bird on the Challenger to try to get children interested in space. But the Big Bird suit ended up being too big, so they sent teacher Krista McAuliffe instead. Shortly after takeoff, the Challenger exploded while millions were watching live on CNN, including McAuliffe's entire school. One of the main engineers behind the rocket revealed that NASA ignored his warnings about launching in cold weather. The night before the launch, he told his wife it's going to blow up. He was one of 5 engineers who voiced their concerns to NASA prior to the launch. Hannibal of Carthage was famous for intimidating his Roman enemies through the use of war elephants. But the Romans eventually learned that elephants are afraid of squealing pigs. So they would lather the backsides of pigs with tar and set them on fire to send the enemy elephants fleeing in horror. A Chinese general with only 100 men once had to defend a town against 150,000 troops. So he told his men to hide, left the gates open, and sat on the wall playing a lute. Certain that it was a trap, the opposing general ordered a full retreat. One of the reasons why the plague was spread to Europe was because the Mongols literally sent it there. This was also one of the first historical accounts of biological warfare. A man from Florida once threw a mouse into a pile of burning leaves. The mouse then ran into the man's home while still on fire, burning the entire house down. While filming the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980, photographer Robert Landsberg realized he had no chance of surviving it. So he wound the film back, put his camera in his backpack, and laid on top of it to protect the film for future researchers. This painting from 1902 has an amazing secret that can only be seen with a mirror placed down the middle. On the left half is a man with his back to serene mountains and a calm sea. This is God. On the right side is a man with his back to an erupting volcano and a dark stormy sea. This is the devil. In 1994, Italian pentathlete Mauro Prosperi was competing in a 145-mile endurance event through the Sahara Desert. During the race, he was disoriented by a sandstorm, causing him to run nearly 200 miles in the wrong direction. He soon found himself completely stranded in the middle of the desert without any resources. 9 days later, he was rescued in a completely different country after losing 40 pounds of body weight. He survived by drinking wet wipes, bat blood, and his own urine. This is the grave of Jesse Presley, Elvis Presley's twin brother who was stillborn. Elvis would often open up to his friends and family about his unborn brother, telling them that he always had a persistent feeling that Jesse was somehow with him throughout his life. In 1880, the Queen of Thailand's boat capsized on the way to her palace. But despite many witnesses, nobody dared to save the drowning queen and her daughter. This was because touching a queen under any circumstances was a crime punishable by death. Many survivors were too weak to digest food even after they were rescued. As a result, about half the survivors of Auschwitz died within days of being rescued. BBC regularly rehearses the Queen's death to ensure that their cover of it is flawless when she actually does die. In 2009, a man sued Pepsi when he was traumatized after finding a mouse in his Mountain Dew. But Pepsi attorneys said this was impossible since Mountain Dew would completely dissolve a mouse within 30 days. Pepsi won the case upon showing that the can was purchased 74 days after it was manufactured. 2 bakery workers died in agony after being sent into a giant bagel oven to carry out repairs. The repair was a delicate procedure that involved crawling through a tight 75-foot-long conveyor belt that slowly cooks bagels. The machine should have been left to cool for 12 hours but was turned back on after only 2. Within 5 minutes, the men were relaying terrifying messages through their walkie-talkies, saying that the oven's core was way too hot. But there was no way of reversing the conveyor belt, and they were trapped on its journey through the oven. The Ghost Army was created in 1944 as the first tactical deception unit in the U.S. Army. They used inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic, and even built phony headquarters to confuse the Nazis. A U.S. naval destroyer won a battle against a Japanese submarine by throwing potatoes at them, which the Japanese thought were grenades. The Royal Air Force dropped matchbooks into enemy territory containing instructions on how a soldier could fake an illness. Once Nazi command heard of this, they stopped sending their troops home when they said they were sick. Therefore, many genuinely sick troops were sent into combat. Giant rock in Finland has been balancing on a smooth surface likely for thousands of years. No one knows how it got there, but it's impossible to move with human strength. In 1784, a Japanese seaman sent a message in a bottle saying that his ship had wrecked. 150 years later, it washed up in the village where he was born. In 2001, the Taliban used dynamite to demolish this 4th century Buddha statue that was carved in Afghanistan. While initially devastating, it was later found that the explosions revealed 50 ancient caves that were untouched for 1600 years. Inside the caves, archaeologists uncovered many ancient relics, including the oldest oil paintings in the world. When there was a drought in Bhopal, India, local priests married 2 frogs to please the god of rain. Sadly, the frogs had to be divorced 2 months later due to the persistent rainfall that destroyed over 9,000 homes. This person was saved from a $300 fine thanks to this absolute bro of a bird blocking their license plate from the camera. This same whale was found and photographed 35 years apart off the coast of Mexico. A man named Walter Summerford was struck by lightning 3 times throughout his life. After his death, his grave was also struck. This 3,000-year-old sculpture of an ancient Egyptian princess looks exactly like Michael Jackson. After a family lost their dog during Hurricane Sandy, they decided to give up and look for a new one 2 years later. So they went to the local shelter, and the first animal the counselor showed them was their missing dog. You're said to have about 6 doppelgangers throughout the world who look exactly like you. These identical strangers each found one of theirs when they happened to sit next to each other on the same flight. In 2015, a man found a Mountain Dew bottle from 1992 that would have won him a brand new Super Nintendo. This Viking sword was found by reindeer hunters at a high altitude in the mountains of Norway. It most likely belonged to a Viking who lost his way and died here over 1,000 years ago. The Osberg ship is a 9th century Viking ship that was discovered in almost perfect condition in a burial mound in Norway. This 1,000-year-old Viking axe head found in Denmark shows why the Vikings were known as pioneers of craftsmanship. An 8-year-old girl found this 1,500-year-old Viking sword while swimming in a lake in Sweden. Upon pulling the sword out of its resting place, she officially became High Queen of the Nordic realm. A man from New Jersey bought a $5 bottle of orange juice from ShopRite, which his wife made him return because she thought it was too expensive. He then decided to buy 2 Powerball tickets with the refunded money and ended up winning the $300 million jackpot. British man Stephen Whiteley turned a $3 bet into a $2 million jackpot after picking all 6 horse race winners. The final horse had never won in his previous 28 races. A man was photographing a plane crossing over a rainbow when it was struck by lightning at the exact same time.